Today we're headed to Eugene, Oregon, to check out the newly renovated Hayward Field at the University of Oregon. I've got a stack of articles and case studies here, and I'm already getting major stadium envy.
It's really something. This renovation is about way more than just updating a building. It's like they've combined history and sustainability with this really cutting-edge design. It's not just a renovation, it's a statement.
That's what we're diving deep into. Think of it like we're getting a backstage pass to see how the architects and engineers transform this place into a theater for track.
Exactly. You'll get to see how they honored the past while pushing the boundaries of what a stadium can be, especially with their innovative use of wood.
Okay, first off, just to set the stage, Hayward Field is legendary, right? It's not just some ordinary stadium.
Oh, absolutely not. We're talking Olympic trials, NCAA championships. Hayward Field has seen some serious track and field history. And for all the Nike fans out there, it's also where Phil Knight himself competed as a student.
Oh, wow. That adds another layer to the story. And speaking of Phil Knight, he's the main reason this whole renovation even happened, right? He didn't just drop a small donation, he went all in.
You're right. He and Penny Knight did. Along with more than 50 other donors, they were really passionate about this project. They wanted to create a world-class facility, one that would honor the past, but also push the limits of design and sustainability.
So they kept the historical feel, but went big with the new design. I mean, that 180-foot tower is pretty hard to miss. It's like they planted a giant Olympic torch right on campus.
Yeah, that tower is definitely a statement piece. It's become a landmark on campus. And it houses a museum dedicated to Oregon's track and field legacy. It's a powerful way of honoring the past while looking ahead to the future.
Okay, let's talk about that incredible wood canopy. It's like they wrapped the entire stadium in a giant wave of wood. I've never seen anything quite like it.
It's really remarkable. It's constructed from over 460 Douglas fir glulam beams, and each beam is uniquely curved. You want to talk about a lot of wood. If you laid all that lumber end to end, it would reach from Hayward Field all the way to Portland and back.
All the way to Portland and back. Wow, what exactly is glulam anyways?
Glulam stands for glue-laminated timber, which is a type of engineered wood. You bond layers of lumber together with super strong adhesives, creating in these huge beams that can span incredible distances.
So they're essentially like giant wooden Legos.
Yeah.
And they used enough to reach Portland and back. That's a lot of trees. Were there any concerns about the environmental impact of using so much wood?
That's where it gets really interesting. Choosing wood was a very deliberate decision. It's a renewable resource, and unlike materials like steel or concrete that release carbon during their production, wood actually stores carbon. It's a nod to Oregon's timber heritage. Legendary Oregon coach Bill Bowerman once said, "Oregon is wood and wood is Oregon." Building this stadium with wood is like a tribute to that idea.
So not only does it look incredible, but it's actually good for the environment. Now, here's my question. Wood and Oregon weather, don't those two things usually clash? I mean, how do you keep all that exposed wood from rotting in the rain?
That was a major challenge. To combat that, they teamed up with a company called Sanson. Sanson developed a special 3-coat protection system for those glulam beams. UV protection, moisture resistance, the works. They even created a custom color called golden wheat to enhance the natural beauty of the Douglas fir.
Golden wheat sounds fancy. They didn't just slap on some paint. They really went the extra mile to protect this wood.
Yeah, it was a huge collaborative effort between Sanson, the glulam fabricator, Western Arc Rib, and the construction company Hoffman Construction. They actually finished the beams before they even arrived at the stadium. It's like each piece got its own custom suit of armor before installation.
That's a whole other level of planning. So, protecting these beams was a massive undertaking. Speaking of which, let's talk about the actual construction process itself. I can't imagine this was an easy project. It's like they took apart a spaceship and rebuilt it with wood.
It really was a complex project. They had this global team of specialists and a really unique design-build approach. That meant the design and construction phases were happening at the same time. It was like they were problem-solving and building at the same time.
How did they keep everyone on the same page with so many moving parts? Did everyone speak the same language, architecturally speaking?
Well, that's where technology came in. They used something called Building Information Modeling, or BIM. Imagine a super detailed 3D model of the entire stadium. They held weekly BIM sessions for months leading up to construction, so everyone, from the architects to the electricians, could see exactly what was happening.
So BIM was like their universal translator, making sure everyone was on the same page, even if they were working from different continents.
Exactly. And to make things even more interesting, they used what's called a reverse engineered construction process. Instead of starting at the beginning and working to the end, they worked backward from the finish state.
Wait, so they started at the finish line and worked backward? That's a wild concept. What was the reason behind that approach?
It was all about the timeline. They had a hard deadline to meet for major events like the Olympic trials. They had to map out each step meticulously to make sure everything stayed on track. It was a race against the clock, and they won.
So they built this incredibly complex stadium by working backward from the finish line. Talk about thinking outside the box. But deadlines weren't the only priority, right? What about the athletes? Did they have any input in this whole process?
Oh, absolutely. They designed the stadium with the athletes front and center. They dedicated nearly 40,000 square feet to training and recovery areas. And that's not even counting the track itself. We're talking underwater treadmills, anti-gravity treadmills, even a barber shop.
A barbershop. Wow, that's some serious dedication to athlete comfort.
Hmm.
What about the actual track surface itself? I'm guessing they didn't just lay down some rubber and call it a day.
Oh no, this track is special. They use this cutting-edge surface that's designed for optimal cushioning and energy return. But here's the kicker. They also installed the same track surface on the concourse and the ADA ramps.
So you could actually run a warm-up lap on the concourse.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
But it wasn't all just about the athletes, right? They had to create a great experience for the fans, too.
Right. They wanted Hayward Field to be a theater for track, a place where fans felt totally immersed in the action.
How did they go about creating that immersive experience? What sets Hayward Field apart from other stadiums in that regard?
Well, they focused on three key things: proximity to the track, seat comfort, and acoustics. They didn't want fans straining their necks or sitting on uncomfortable bleachers for hours.
Okay, let's break that down. What did they do to bring the fans closer to the action?
They designed the seating bowl in a really unique way. It's asymmetrical, so most of the 12,650 seats are concentrated around the finish line. It's almost like the stadium itself is leaning in to watch the race.
That's a really cool visual. And what about the seats themselves? Are we talking luxury recliners here?
Not quite recliners, but definitely an upgrade from your typical stadium seat. They're wider, have more legroom, and every seat has a clear view of the track.
Okay, comfortable seating, check.
Mm.
What about the acoustics? Did they install a giant speaker system?
They actually did something even cooler. They have this translucent ETFE roof. Not only does it protect fans from the elements, but it also enhances the stadium's acoustics. All the sounds, the cheers, the gasps, the pounding of feet on the track, it's all amplified.
So the stadium itself becomes part of the show. I bet that creates an incredible energy.
It does. It's designed to create a completely unique sensory experience. You're not just watching a track meet, you're feeling it.
All this cutting-edge technology and design, did they completely abandon the old Hayward Field in the process? Or did they manage to weave in some of the history?
They really made an effort to honor the past. Remember that museum in the tower we talked about? That's just the start. They've incorporated salvaged elements from the original stadium, things like plaques dedicated to Bill Bowerman. They even use some of his training philosophies as inspiration for the design.
So it's like a treasure hunt for track and field history buffs. They get the modern design and a trip down memory lane.
Exactly. Speaking of Bill Bowerman, remember that quote, "Oregon is wood and wood is Oregon." This renovation really embodies that spirit. Using all the Douglas fir is more than just an aesthetic choice. It's a statement about identity and Oregon's connection to its timber heritage.
It's like they built the stadium from Oregon's soul.
And by choosing wood, they're making a statement about sustainability. Hayward Field is more than just a beautiful building. It's a symbol of Oregon's commitment to the environment.
So it's a monument to wood, to Oregon, to sustainability. Really impressive. But let's be real, this is a fancy stadium. Why should someone who's not an athlete or architect even care about this project?
That's a great question. Hayward Field shows that we don't have to choose between beautiful buildings and protecting the environment. It's possible to have both.
So they're proving that sustainable design can be just as awe-inspiring as traditional methods.
Exactly. It really showcases the potential of wood as a large-scale building material. Imagine what other things we could build using sustainable wood. Entire city blocks, maybe.
It sounds like Hayward Field is more than just a stadium. It's a beacon of hope for the future of construction.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's a giant leap in the right direction.
We've covered a lot of ground here today. History, design, sustainability. This stadium really is something special. Did we miss anything?
I think we've touched on the most important aspects. This project really highlights what can happen when visionary thinking, respect for the past, and a commitment to the future all come together.
I agree. I'm feeling inspired to go for a run, or maybe just relax in one of those comfy stadium seats.
Huh, I wouldn't blame you.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. What's the one thing about Hayward Field that really blows your mind?
Hmm, that's a tough one. For me, I think it's the way they've blurred the lines between indoors and outdoors. The wood, the natural light, the views. It's like they brought the outside in.
That raises an interesting question. Could other stadiums learn from this approach? Could we create more spaces that feel connected to the natural world? Maybe that's something we can explore in the next part of our deep dive.
I'd love to talk more about that. It's a fascinating concept with a lot of potential.
Sounds good.
Great. Yeah, it's a really cool idea, isn't it? Bringing the outdoors in is becoming more popular in architecture. Hayward Field is a great example of how it can work on a large scale.
Definitely something to explore more later. But first, let's get into the engineering behind that amazing wood canopy. How do they actually build that thing? I mean, the curves are incredible, and it's got to be strong enough to handle whatever weather Oregon throws at it.
You're right. It's more than just how it looks. It's got to be structurally sound. They had to make sure that canopy could hold up under heavy snow and strong winds. That's a big deal, especially when you're talking about something that covers such a huge space.
Did they just, like, glue a bunch of wood together and hope for the best?
Not quite. It's a combination of glulam beams and steel connections. It's sort of a hybrid system. Get the best of both worlds, the strength of steel and the beauty of wood.
So it's like a wood skeleton with steel muscles holding it all together.
That's a great way to put it. And you know what's really cool? They hid those steel connections inside the wood beams, so you don't even see them. It looks like it's all wood.
Talk about hidden strength. But those curved glulam beams must have been a nightmare to create. How do you even bend wood into those kinds of shapes?
It's a pretty intricate process. Each beam was custom designed. They used 3D modeling software. It's like trying to build a giant curved Lego out of wood. Every piece has to be shaped perfectly and fit with the one next to it.
Like a massive, high-stakes jigsaw puzzle. And those beams were huge. How did they even transport them to the stadium?
Yeah, that was a logistical challenge. They had to map out specific routes, making sure they could get those beams under bridges and through tight spaces. They had special trailers and equipment just to move those things. It was quite a sight.
It must have been like a parade of giant wooden dinosaurs. So they got them to the stadium, but how did they lift those massive curved beams into place?
Cranes and a lot of careful planning. Each beam was different, so they had to install them in a specific order. The construction crew really earned their paychecks on this one.
It sounds like a carefully orchestrated ballet of construction equipment and wooden beams.
Whoa.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. What impact do you think this whole renovation will have on the university, even the city of Eugene?
Hayward Field has always been a big deal for Oregon. People in Eugene love track and field. But this takes it to a whole other level. It's a world-class facility that will attract even more top athletes and fans.
They're not messing around. They're serious about making Eugene the place for track and field, not just in the U.S., but globally.
You got it. It's more than just sports, though. It's a point of pride for the university and the whole community, a place where people can connect, create memories, and celebrate their love of the sport.
It's like they've created a landmark that captures the spirit of Eugene. And I love how they blended the history of Hayward Field with all this modern design.
Yeah, that blend of old and new is really special. Remember the 180-foot tower? Modern and striking. But if you look closely, they incorporated elements from the original Hayward Field, like those salvaged plaques we talked about earlier.
It's like a bridge between the past and the present, honoring the legacy while embracing the future.
Exactly. And that same idea is there in the materials, too. The wood is the nod to Oregon's history. But the way they used it with those advanced glulam techniques is definitely looking ahead.
Proof that sustainability and beauty aren't mutually exclusive. You can have both.
And Hayward Field proves it. A beautiful, functional space that's also good for the environment.
Speaking of functionality, let's circle back to that theater for track idea. They really went all out to create that immersive experience for the fans, huh?
They did. It's all about creating this electric atmosphere. making people feel like they're part of the action. Remember the asymmetrical seating bowl?
Oh yeah, like the stadium is leaning in, eager to see who wins.
That's the one. Combine that with the comfortable seating and the way they enhance the acoustics, and it's just a completely different kind of spectator experience.
So you don't just watch the race, you feel it. You're in it.
Exactly. And they thought of every detail, the concessions, the flow of traffic. Everything is designed to make the fan experience as enjoyable as possible.
Wow, so they really took a holistic approach. It sounds like they thought of everything.
They really did. That attention to detail is everywhere, from the giant canopy down to the smallest design choices.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in all the technical stuff. But when it comes down to it, Hayward Field is about something bigger. It's a place where dreams are made.
That's beautifully said. It's about human potential, about breaking records, about young athletes finding inspiration.
And for fans, it's about seeing those moments of triumph, seeing athletes push the limits of what's possible.
It's a reminder of how powerful sports can be. They bring us together, they inspire us, they lift us up.
And Hayward Field provides the perfect backdrop for those stories.
It's truly a one-of-a-kind place.
Okay, before we head into part 3, let's do a quick recap. We've talked about the history, the design, the focus on athletes, the amazing spectator experience, the sustainability, and the legacy of Hayward Field. But there's one piece we haven't really discussed yet, the collaboration. This wasn't a one-man show. It took a whole team of people to pull this off.
Absolutely. Hayward Field wouldn't exist without all those people working together. Architects, engineers, contractors, specialists from all over the world, all focused on a single goal.
Like they assembled the Avengers of design and construction.
Exactly. And like any great team, they needed a leader, someone to keep everyone on track.
So who was the captain of this dream team?
Well, Hoffman Construction played a really important role. They were the general contractor, coordinating everyone's efforts, keeping things on schedule, making sure all the pieces fit together.
That sounds like a pretty huge job. How did they keep everyone on the same page with so many people involved?
Communication, communication, communication.
All right.
Regular meetings, site visits, and of course, technology played a big part. Remember BIM, that 3D modeling software?
Yeah, the digital blueprint for the whole stadium.
Right, that was key. It helped them spot potential problems before they happen on the construction site. Imagine if a steel connection and a glulam beam didn't line up. They could see that in the model and fix it before it became a real issue.
It's like they built the whole stadium virtually first.
Exactly. That saved a ton of time and money. But it wasn't just about the technology. It was about creating a culture of teamwork and respect.
Everyone felt valued. Everyone could share their ideas.
Right. They listened to each other, worked together to solve problems. That's how you build something truly special.
And the result is a stadium that's greater than the sum of its parts.
You got it. Hayward Field shows what happens when you bring talented people together with a shared vision.
Speaking of the building process, I'm sure it wasn't all smooth sailing. What were some of the big challenges they faced along the way?
Well, building something this complex is never easy. The timeline was a big one. They had to be ready for the Olympic trials no matter what. That put a lot of pressure on everyone.
That's a lot of pressure. How did they manage to stay on schedule with so much riding on it?
It was a lot of hard work and careful planning. They had to coordinate with all the different subcontractors, and they had to be really good at solving problems on the fly. When things went wrong, they couldn't just stop. They had to figure out a way to keep going.
They had to be flexible, think on their feet.
Absolutely. Like a game of chess with high stakes. Every move had to be calculated.
But it wasn't just about deadlines, right? They also had to make sure everyone working on the project was safe.
Of course. Safety is always the top priority. Hoffman Construction has a really strong safety record, and they took a lot of precautions to make sure everyone on site was protected.
What kind of safety measures did they have in place?
They had daily safety briefings, training programs, and a zero-tolerance policy for unsafe practices. And they used technology to help identify potential hazards. Everyone knew that safety was the most important thing.
It sounds like they created a culture of safety. Everyone was looking out for each other.
Exactly. And the result was that there were no major accidents during the entire construction process.
That's an amazing accomplishment. It's a testament to how seriously they took safety. It shows the professionalism and dedication of everyone on the team.
It does. They built a world-class stadium, but they did it safely.
As we're talking about this whole process, it strikes me that there are a lot of similarities between building a stadium and competing in a track and field event.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, both require meticulous planning, precise execution, and the ability to overcome obstacles. And in both cases, you have a team of people working together to achieve a common goal.
I like that analogy. It's like the construction crew was running its own marathon, they had a finish line to cross, and they had to face challenges along the way.
And they crossed that finish line with a stunning stadium to show for their efforts.
It's really inspiring when you think about it. It shows you that anything is possible with hard work, dedication, and a little bit of creativity.
Well said. Okay, we've talked about the challenges of construction, the safety measures they took, and the parallels between building a stadium and competing in track and field. Now, I want to dive into the craftsmanship that went into building Hayward Field. Designing something beautiful is one thing, but actually bringing it to life is another story entirely.
Absolutely. It's easy to focus on the big picture, but we shouldn't forget about the people who actually built this stadium. The welders, electricians, carpenters, concrete finishers, all the skilled tradespeople who poured their hearts and souls into this project.
They're the unsung heroes of this story.
You could say that. And the level of craftsmanship at Hayward Field is truly remarkable. Look at the precision of the steelwork, the smoothness of the concrete, the intricate details of the wood canopy. Every detail showcases the skill and passion of the people who built it.
It's like a symphony of craftsmanship, with each trade playing its part to create a masterpiece.
That's a great way to put it. It reminds us that even with all the technology we have today, there's still a need for human skill and artistry in construction.
Absolutely. And Hayward Field is a shining example of that, a testament to the talent of the people who built it.
Their work will be admired for years to come.
As we're talking about craftsmanship, I can't help but think about that wood canopy again. It's such an amazing feat of engineering and design. Can you tell us more about how they designed and built those glulam beams?
Oh, absolutely. That canopy is a testament to the collaboration between the architects and the fabricators at Western Arc Rib. The architects had this vision of a sweeping, wave-like structure. They wanted it to feel like the energy of the athletes on the track.
It's a very fluid and expressive form.
It is. And turning that vision into something they could actually build was a huge challenge. They had to figure out how to make it structurally sound, how to create those curves, how to make it all work.
They had to balance form and function. Not an easy task with something this complex.
You're telling me. They had to test all sorts of different techniques, experiment with different adhesives, run a lot of simulations.
So it was a lot of trial and error, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with wood.
Exactly. And all of this while staying on budget and on schedule.
Can you walk us through how they actually make one of those glulam beams?
Sure. The first step is finding the right wood. They used Douglas fir for this project. They inspect every piece of wood to make sure it's strong enough and meets their standards.
So they're not using just any old wood. It has to be the best of the best.
Right. And once they have the wood, they cut it into these thin layers. Those layers are then glued together using a super strong adhesive.
So they're basically making a high-tech wood sandwich.
Exactly. And the cool part is that they can arrange those layers in different ways to create beams that are curved or angled.
Ah, that's how they made those crazy curves in the Hayward Field canopy.
You got it. They have these special presses that can bend the laminated wood into the shape they need. Then they clamp it together and wait for the adhesive to dry.
Sounds like a very precise process.
It is, but the results are pretty amazing. Glulam beams are super strong, really durable, and can be used in so many different ways.
And they look incredible, especially when you have a whole bunch of them forming a giant wave over a stadium.
It's a great example of what you can do with wood. It's such a versatile material.
You know, with a project this big, it makes you wonder about the environmental impact. Did they do anything to make it more sustainable?
Oh yeah, for sure. Sustainability was a top priority from the very beginning. One of the main reasons they chose to use so much wood was because of its environmental benefits.
How so? What makes wood so sustainable?
Well, it's renewable. Unlike concrete and steel, wood can be replanted and harvested over and over again.
So it's a closed loop, you use it, you plant more, and the cycle continues.
Exactly. And it takes less energy to produce wood than it does to produce concrete or steel. Trees actually absorb carbon dioxide as they grow, so building with wood actually helps remove carbon from the atmosphere.
So they were actually fighting climate change by building this stadium with wood. That's pretty cool.
It is. But they didn't stop there. They also did a bunch of other things to make the construction process more sustainable.
Like what?
Well, they got as many materials locally as possible to cut down on transportation emissions. They used recycled materials in some of the concrete and steel. They put in energy-efficient lighting and heating and cooling systems. And they had a whole plan for dealing with waste. They wanted to keep as much construction debris out of landfills as possible.
It sounds like they thought of everything.
They really tried to, and all that effort paid off.
Hayward Field is beautiful, functional, and environmentally friendly. A triple threat.
Absolutely. It sets a great example for other stadiums and big construction projects.
It's a reminder that we can build for the future without trashing the planet.
Well said.
So, as we wrap up this part of our Hayward Field deep dive, what's the main takeaway about sustainability that you hope people will remember?
Sustainability isn't just an afterthought. You have to think about it from the very beginning. The design, the materials, the way you build it. It's about making conscious choices at every step of the process.
So it's not about just adding a few solar panels and calling it a day. It's about changing the way we think about design and construction.
Exactly. And Hayward Field is a great example of that. It shows that you can incorporate sustainable practices into even the most ambitious projects.
Well said. That's a great segue into the final part of our deep dive. I'm really interested to explore how they brought all these elements together, the technology, the design, the sustainability, the collaboration. It's such a fascinating example of human ingenuity.
Yeah, it's remarkable what they accomplished. It's more than just a bunch of cool features. It's really a fusion of design, engineering, sustainability, and the human experience.
You nailed it.
We've talked about all the different parts, but the thing that really makes it stand out is how it all fits together to create something truly special.
Let's focus a bit more on the collaboration aspect. When you see the finished stadium, it's hard to grasp how many people were involved and how many decisions had to be made along the way.
Right. Architects, engineers, contractors, craftspeople. A massive amount of talent went into this.
And they all had to be on the same page to make this vision a reality.
They did. Seamless teamwork was crucial.
Was there ever any friction? Times when those different viewpoints clashed? I can't imagine it was always easy.
Oh, there were definitely some challenges. Remember those incredible Glulam beams for the canopy? Each one a custom shape to create that wave effect.
Of course. How could I forget? They're like the stars of the show.
Well, getting those beams right was no walk in the park. You had the architects with their artistic vision, and then the engineers at Western Arc Rib who had to make sure it would actually work structurally.
A clash of the titans. Art versus science.
Kind of, yeah. They had to test different ways of laminating the wood, experiment with different types of glue, run a bunch of simulations to make sure it could handle the weight of the roof and the Oregon weather.
That's where those BIM sessions must really help. Being able to see the design in 3D and make sure it all worked before they started building.
Exactly. With BIM, they could catch problems early on, like maybe a steel connection interfering with a Glulam curve. They could fix those things in the model before they became a real problem on the construction site.
Like having a magic crystal ball to prevent construction disasters.
You could say that. It also helped to make sure everyone understood what was going on, no matter where they were in the world.
Speaking of different perspectives, remember that amazing track surface? The one that extends onto the concourses and ramps, so athletes have more space to train.
Oh, yeah, that was brilliant.
Well, fun fact, that idea actually came from the coaches. They were the ones who realized they needed more space for year-round training, so they worked with the designers to figure out a solution.
You see, sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected places. It pays to think outside the box and listen to the people who will actually be using the space.
So what are the biggest takeaways from the Hayward Field project when it comes to collaboration? What can we learn from this team?
Well, communication is essential. You have to create a space where everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas.
Yeah.
Even if they sound a little out there at first.
So don't be afraid to brainstorm, to throw things out there and see what sticks.
Right. You never know where the next brilliant idea will come from.
What else?
Value diversity. A team with different backgrounds, skills, and perspectives, that's where you find the real magic.
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. And celebrate the wins, both big and small. Make sure people feel appreciated. Create an environment of mutual respect. That's what keeps everyone motivated and inspired.
That's good advice for any team, not just in architecture. Okay, let's talk about something else that makes Hayward Field special. The sense of place, the way it's woven into the community.
You're right. Hayward Field is more than just a building. It's a symbol of pride for the University of Oregon and the city of Eugene.
People in Eugene are crazy about track and field. They call it Tracktown USA for a reason.
And Hayward Field is the heart of Tracktown. It's a place where history has been made, where athletes train, where fans gather, and where the whole community comes together.
And this renovation, it didn't just upgrade a stadium, it created a space that's even more inviting and welcoming for everyone.
Yes. They made it more open to the campus, created spaces where people can gather, even when there's no track meet happening.
Like the stadium itself is saying, come on in, there's more to see here.
And they've incorporated the surrounding landscape into the design. You can see the trees, the hills. It's like they've blurred the line between nature and the built environment.
That amazing wood canopy is a big part of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like bringing the forest into the stadium.
It is. The natural light, the green spaces, the outdoor seating, it all adds to that feeling of connection.
They really thought about how people would interact with the space, inside and out. What about the community spaces within the stadium?
Besides the museum, the concourses are designed for people to hang out, to connect with each other. They're wide and open, with areas for people to mingle, grab food, or just relax.
So you can go to Hayward Field to see a track meet, but you can also just go to hang out with friends, get some work done, or just enjoy the atmosphere.
Exactly. Hayward Field is more than just a stadium. It's a community center, a place where people can connect and feel like they belong.
It's a reminder that architecture can shape communities and enrich our lives. Hayward Field is a shining example of what's possible when we think about more than just the physical structure of a building.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, this deep dive into Hayward Field has been incredible. We've covered the history, the design, the sustainability, the community impact, and the incredible collaboration that made it all happen. I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for what goes into creating a truly great building.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? It shows you that architecture is so much more than just creating shelter. It's about creating spaces that inspire us, connect us, and enrich our lives.
And Hayward Field does all of that and more.
Absolutely. It's a real testament to human ingenuity, collaboration, and a respect for both the past and the future.
I agree. So as we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners?
I'd say pay attention to the buildings around you, the spaces you inhabit every day. Take a moment to appreciate the design, the materials, the people who built them.
It's easy to overlook those things, but there's so much creativity and innovation happening all around us.
And those spaces have a real impact on our lives, on our communities, even on how we see ourselves.
Well said. To all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep. You never know what you'll discover, even in your own backyard. Thanks for joining us.